Hi there! Welcome to Pallet University and the next episode of our PaleoPokes series, in which we take a look at the fossil Pokemon from a real paleontologist perspective. If you haven't seen any of the previous videos in this series, make sure to check out the link up in the cards in the corner, as well as if you're not subscribed, make sure to do that down below, and while you're down there, make sure to leave a thumbs up and a comment to help me outsmart the YouTube algorithm. If you're new to this series, basically what we do is we break down the fossil Pokemon and take a look at what fossil animal that Pokemon was likely based on, as well as take a look at its learn set and Pokedex entries to try and figure out what type it was before it was fossilized. This episode is actually part 2 of our sort of dual parts of covering the Generation 5 fossils, so if you have not seen the first part in this sort of block of videos where I talk about Tortuga and Caracosta, that video will be up in the cards as well. But with that, I guess let's get talking about Archen and Archeops, because they are so weird. These two are pretty clearly based off of the first bird, Archaeopteryx lithographica, with Archeops possibly taking some inspiration from Microraptor as well, because there's some pretty strong evidence that Microraptor had flight feathers on both its front limbs and its hind limbs too. And Archeops has much more feathered hind limbs than you typically would see in most dinosaurs, really. So maybe some inspiration there, I'm not quite sure. Archaeopteryx is really groundbreaking because it was some of the first really strong evidence that we found that show the relationship between birds and dinosaurs. Its title as the first bird is pretty misleading though, because A, it wasn't quite a bird. If you saw it, you would you'd be much more inclined to say that is a dinosaur rather than that is a bird. It still had a long bony tail, it still had claws on its hands, it still had hands, for one. It still had teeth instead of like a hard beak like we see in modern birds today. So it was well on the way to modern birds, what you would see and recognize as a bird, but it was still definitely a dinosaur. We also have specimens from some other species of dinosaurs that are also very bird-like that date back to a little bit older than Archaeopteryx, such as Anchiornis, Zhaotingia, and Orornis. Archaeopteryx is actually a very fitting inspiration for these, two Pokemon, because for a long time we weren't actually sure that it could fly, much like Archen. We were pretty sure that it could glide from tree to tree pretty efficiently, very well, but we weren't quite sure that it could actually maintain flight. But some recent evidence from 2018 suggests that it actually could, but it just uses some different biomechanics than we see in modern birds. A fun fact that I really like to give people who don't think in deep time like we geologists are trained to do is that we actually live closer in time to Tyrannosaurus rex than Tyrannosaurus rex lived in time to Archaeopteryx. We're only about 66 million years separated from T-Rex, whereas T-Rex was about 80 million years separated from Archaeopteryx. There's a feather in your cap. We will get to the typing in a little bit, but while doing the research for this video, I fell down quite the deep rabbit hole that I now feel obligated to share with you all. I almost always start my research for these videos by going to the Bulbapedia page of the first Pokemon in the evolutionary line, so in this case, Archen. Bulbapedia has a really convenient biology section, which mostly is just sort of like a description of what the Pokemon looks like, but occasionally has some diamonds in the rough. This was one of those occasions. Archen's biology section was pretty normal until like the last 2 sentences, which basically said that Archen's cry can cause the tree that grows the fruit that it eats to grow. And so I thought to myself, well, that's a little odd. It's not a grass type, and also several of its Pokedex entries mention that it eats prey, meaning that it, eats not plants. So why would it happen? Why would Archen's cries do this? Of course, this bit of text was sourced from the anime and not the games, which is sort of the cause of that inconsistency. And so I made the mistake of watching that episode of the anime that features Archen and Archeops, and I really wish that I hadn't. because it was terrible. It's always a good practice in science to recognize and acknowledge your biases. I cannot stand the Gen 5 anime, mostly because of Silent, to be honest, but I also think a lot of it was just really cringy and not all that well written, which is why I didn't watch most of it, which is why I never have seen this episode of the anime before doing this research. For your reference, the episode is called Archaeopteryx in the Modern World, and it's episode 36, I believe, of the first season of the black and white anime. For your reference, the episode is called Archaeopteryx in the Modern World, and it's episode 36, I believe, of the first season of the black and white anime. TLDR, if you have not seen it, Professor Juniper and Fennel used Dream Mist from Fennel's Musharna to revive a plume fossil which turned out to be an Archen. Side note, since when has Dream Mist been able to do this? Like, I have now on my list of videos to make a completely different video about how we revive fossil Pokemon. Because they literally just like hook up a hose to Musharna's forehead and it just revives the fossil. Like they're, Fennel types some stuff in the computer, but like no further explanation is given other than, hey, this is what this does. Anyway, they revive Archen and with it apparently some seeds, which doesn't really make sense, but sure. Neither of these supposed scientists noticed that these seeds were revived with Archen, which is a really big problem because especially in paleontology, observation skills are incredibly important. For my research, I need to be able to look at two horse teeth next to each other, be like, okay, are these the same? And it's not just, based on size things. There are lots of little squiggles and different things in horse teeth that even vary just based on how old the horse was when it died. You need extreme attention to detail, which apparently Fennel and Juniper don't seem to have in this episode. But again, whatever, it's the anime. Archen immediately starts attacking everybody and starts freaking out, and Ash literally headbutts it and knocks it unconscious. It eventually wakes up, and they try to teach it how to fly because they feel bad for it because it's pathetic and can't. At various points, Archen freaks out and squawks, which makes the seeds grow. And they never explain why. Just because the seeds were revived with Archen. That is literally like a single line of dialogue.
I'd say some ancient seeds must have been fossilized along with Archen's plume fossil and restored at the same time it was.
That they're like, oh, I guess the seeds were revived with Archen. It makes them grow. That's literally it. Once again, anyway. It eats the fruit once the tree gets big enough to grow the fruit, and, as soon as it eats the fruit, it evolves because Pokemon. And basically, as soon as it evolves, Team Rocket shows up because, of course, they do. And, Archaeopteryx, now the newly evolved Archaeopteryx, sends them packing. And then how does the episode end? 3 more Archaeopteryx just show up out of nowhere and adopt this one into their little flock. There's literally no reason for this. They talk several times about how no one's ever seen even an Archen before, let alone an Archaeopteryx. And that these 3 just happen to be within earshot to hear all of Archen/Archaeopteryx's cries while it's, trying to learn how to fly and fighting Team Rocket. And they're like, oh, they must be reasonably close because they can hear it. And so they just come in and adopt Archaeopteryx and then fly off into the sunset. Because it's Pokemon, and of course they do. And these scientists don't even seem curious about where these Pokemon that they thought were extinct for at least the last 100 million years. I think they say 100 million in the episode. But they just don't even seem curious. They're just like, one of those mysteries of the Pokemon world, I guess. And then just leave it at that. Professor Juniper repeatedly, this is not a one-time thing, she says this repeatedly, that Archen is the first flying-type Pokemon.
Take Archen, for example. Though Archen's the ancestor to all flying-type Pokemon, it can't fly.
And that Archen is the ancestor of all flying-type Pokemon. I really have to believe that that is a mistranslation from the original Japanese script, although I don't think so, because I think at one point Ash says bird Pokemon, like that is the ancestor of bird Pokemon, and then like immediately afterward, Juniper says all flying type Pokemon. So I don't know which they actually mean, but the actual scientist is the one saying all flying type Pokemon. The ancestor of all bird Pokemon? Yeah, sure, I could probably believe that, but Professor Juniper, you're telling me that this Pokemon descended from Archen. This Pokemon. Okay, maybe that one, but you get my point. That was a really long digression. But if I had to sit through that nonsense, so did you. On to the actual content of this video. 10 minutes deep already, but whatever. These two are particularly hard to find typings for because the obvious ones aren't really available. They can't be dragon types, despite Dragon Breath being pretty much the only move that Archen/Archeops uses in that episode of the anime, and they also learn a fair amount of dragon type moves, but dragon type is not a type they can be based on the rules of fossilization that we set way back in this episode. They don't really have any other notable moves, to sort of give me some inspiration or give me some evidence for what other type they can be. So let's look at the Pokedex. Basically, the Pokedex says that Archen can't fly, and that Archeops is bad at flying and needs a running start. So I guess in other words, they're stuck on the ground? Ground does seem to make some sense in that context, and I was actually at first inclined to make Archen ground flying type, and then make Archeops pure flying, because it has left the ground and is now actually able to fly. But since it's pretty bad, and even the Pokedex says that Archeops needs a running start and that it is actually better at running than it is at flying, I think I'm just going to keep them both ground flying. Could this video have only been like 3 minutes long without that digression? Yes. But do I regret it? Yeah, also yes. My life is worse off for having seen that episode of the anime, and it's literally my greatest wish, as I was writing the script, to be able to forget it. But I can't. Let me know your thoughts on this type suggestion down in the comments below, as well as let me know what is the worst episode of the anime in your opinion, and why is it this one? Make sure to follow me on Twitter at Pallet_U. This episode is just kind of a meme at this point. Follow me on Twitter at Pallet_U to keep up on all things Pokemon science, and as always, there's a time and place for everything.